Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining our first virtual topical training for the year, Reimagining Challenges, How to Capitalize and Expand Programming During COVID-19. We are going to go ahead and get started with our agenda because we have a full afternoon. I would like to begin by introducing Resa Matthew. She is the Director for the Division of Adolescent Development and Support. Resa?
So thank you, Taya. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first topical training of 2021. As Taya mentioned, I'm Resa Matthew, and I serve as the Director for the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program. And as you can see through the use of technology and conferencing software, we're once again able to gather virtually to work together with the ultimate goal of continuing to improve upon all of the great work being done in the Personal Responsibility Education Program, or PREP. Much of our program efforts drive youth towards attaining optimal health, and through that, opportunity. This objective aligns directly with the PREP legislation that is inclusive of our most vulnerable youth who are at the highest risk, such as culturally underrepresented youth populations. As we begin 2021 with a fresh perspective, we also know that we have a new administration, and through that, the federal government's continued commitment in support for all underserved communities. And to that end, the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program staff certainly appreciates each of you dedicating your time over the next 3 afternoons to expand your strategies in the approach you take to serving the youth in your programs. Expanding your strategies seems like a good metaphor, since the theme of our virtual topical training is reimagining challenges. And in this case, one of the significant challenges we have and continue to face is the COVID-19 pandemic. For the last 11 months or so, we've faced this public health emergency, not really knowing what the future will bring or how long we may be in this posture of uncertainty. Nevertheless, during this time, there's been no shortage of the efforts and commitment of all of you as our grantees to adapt and overcome the way you manage those challenges. This PREP virtual topical training will address this topic head on and look at it from the perspective of opportunity. Our 2 tracks, one tailored to program administrators, the other program facilitators, look at strategies that treat our current environment as a new opportunity to adapt our approaches to fit the needs of our youth. We know they have been also facing these same hurdles, but with a different lens than you and me. And so we encourage you to look for ways to leverage the information presented as part of this training today and over the next couple of days in your day-to-day interaction to help young people overcome individually, but also to support your colleagues and other program providers as we work through these times together to identify and share opportunities that we identify and look at. I would like to recognize first our PREP training and technical assistance partner, RTI International, for their continued partnership and expertise for the great work they've done in preparing and hosting this event. I'd also like to extend my thanks and gratitude to you, all of our grantees as well. Your compassion, caring, and dedication are manifested in the multiple ways you impact young people's lives. And if we can go to the next slide, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce and thank FYSB leadership and the APP program team for their hard work and support as they also navigate these uncertain times. But I have to admit that they always make my job that much easier. So I will start at the top with our, so Debbie Powell, who's wearing 2 hats. She's our acting associate commissioner, and she's our deputy associate commissioner. And within the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program, we have 2 program managers, Labrita White and Vernay Martin. And we have a whole host of federal project officers that support our team, starting with Jessica Johnson, Christine Zakor, Tena Gebretzidik, Ricky Richard, Alexandria Washington, Tanya Matthews, Letitia Winston, Patrice Moss, Latonia Coriat, Tarshika Thompson, and Owen Burns. And so this is who makes up not just FYSB leadership, but the adolescent pregnancy prevention team. And I express my gratitude to each one of you for all of the hard work that you all continue to do as you have worked through challenges with working with your elder parents, as well as with children and navigating them through school as well. So I thank you for that. And I just have one more request of you. So at the end of the third day, please be sure to complete your participant surveys. I think that we utilize these surveys to help us plan for and improve these trainings and technical assistance that we offer to you. And you can be sure that the input you offer contributes to constantly improving our adolescent pregnancy prevention program. So once again, thank you for your time, your commitment, and your dedication to your communities and the youth you serve. And I'm now going to turn it back over to Taya McMillan.
Thank you, Resa. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide is a snapshot of the institutions and organizations that are supporting the training over the next 3 days. For our speakers, we have Wharton, University of Pennsylvania, University of Cincinnati, 1000 Feathers, Exchange Family Center, and of course, our partners, ETR, Child Trends, and MEES. Next slide. This is a quick snapshot of our objectives. Just a few moments here. At the end of this training, participants will be able to identify opportunities to adapt and tailor program activities to align with participants' needs in the current environment. You will also be able to incorporate best practices for engaging key partners at all levels of program implementation, assess capacity of program and staff to support and/or facilitate program implementation in a variety of settings, and finally, provide situational support to staff and others during difficult and challenging times. This is just a quick snapshot of our agenda for the day. We've had our welcome and opening remarks. Next, we will have a Contagious with Jonah Berger, and we'll take a quick break and come back to our facilitator groups. Day 2 agenda, we'll start off with our grantee panel and then go into our breakouts again with program facilitators and administrators. And we'll have breakout sessions also for the afternoon. And day 3, we'll kick off with the welcome and networking overview for the grantee networking session. And then we will have our Get in Your Resilient Zone session and wrap up with our Q&A, closing, and of course, evaluation. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Jonah Berger. He is from Wharton, and the title of his presentation is Contagious: How to Expand the Program Reach During COVID-19 and Beyond. Welcome, Jonah.
Fantastic. Okay. So thank you guys for having me. It's obvious you're doing amazing, powerful work. The question is how to increase the impact of that work. Right? We have wonderful programs. How can we get more use in our programs? We've got great information. We've got great content. How can we expose more people to that content? And how can we do it without increasing the amount of resources that we have to put out there? Obviously, getting people to sign up for programs in person is challenging. Getting them to do it remotely can be even more challenging. Finding the people that might find these programs interesting or valuable is challenging. We can obviously use traditional sort of advertising or owned media, if you will, but how can we increase the impact of our efforts to reach these folks and do so in a way that will engage them in these initiatives and engage their friends as well? And so to help us get there, I actually want to start in a very different place. I want to start by playing a game for a moment, and that game is called Which is Tastier? And I promise you've never played this game before, but you will get the hang of it very quickly. I'm going to put on 2 things up on the screen, and I'm going to ask you which of those things is tastier. And importantly, I want you to be honest. Not which thing you think you wish was tastier, not which thing you think should be tastier, but which of them is actually tastier. I promise you'll get the hang of this quite quickly. So our first contestant is a wonderful, delicious head of broccoli. You're probably aware that broccoli has a lot of vitamins and nutrients. You're probably aware that broccoli has a lot of fiber. You may not have realized that broccoli has a lot of vitamin C. but it does. The next time you have a cold and you think you need a tall glass of orange juice, think about a tall stalk of broccoli instead. But that's contestant number 1. And contestant number 2 is a cheeseburger. Now, this is not my version of a cheeseburger. If I was going to eat a cheeseburger, it would certainly have bacon on top because I do love bacon. I might grill the onions. I might swap out the American cheese for blue cheese. I might keep the pickles because I like pickles. Feel free to put whatever toppings you like on the cheeseburger. And to keep things even, to be fair, feel free to put whatever toppings you like on the broccoli as well. Okay, so let's take a quick vote in the chat. How many of you would go which is tastier? How many go with the cheeseburger? And how many would go with the broccoli? So let's see a quick show in the chat. Mostly burger, very heavily burger with a couple, not just a couple, a few people for broccoli, probably maybe about 10%, maybe 15% for broccoli. And so I want to point out a few things from this, right? First, I'm wondering who the broccoli folks are. Maybe you guys are vegetarians, maybe you're vegans, maybe you're liars. I'll let your colleagues guess based on how well they know you. But my point here is really simple. We all know that we should eat more broccoli. We all know that we should eat more fruits and vegetables. Organizations have had decades of time, and at this point, probably billions of dollars trying to get people to eat more fruits and vegetables. And yet they don't do it, right? When push comes to shove, when it's late at night, if you're on the road, if you're tired, the cheeseburger beckons. And it's not random or luck how it works. It fits better with the way our tongues and our stomachs are designed, right? McDonald's has spent millions of dollars engineering French fries, the right amount of crisp and salt and sugar. They hit your tongue just lights up. Certain food is tastier than others. And I'm sure you guys get that, and that's an easy point to understand. But you're probably saying, well, what does that have to do with our programs? What does that have to do with getting more youth to sign up? What does that have to do with people finding our content more engaging? What does food have to do with that? Well, I'd like to take this analogy of certain food being tastier than others and port it to a slightly different domain. How tasty is our messaging? How tasty is the way we communicate with the audience that we're trying to communicate with? Because too often organizations have great content, they have great ideas, they have great stuff, right? But if that stuff isn't pitched in a way, framed in a way that's tasty to the audience we're trying to impact, it's not going to have the resonance that we might want. I think a lot about cheeseburgers and broccoli, but you can even think about Brussels sprouts as being a better example. Right. So when I was growing up, Brussels sprouts were the worst thing my family could cook. They would steam them. They smelled terrible. They tasted terrible. I never wanted to eat them. And then fast forward to my adult life, and I went to a new American restaurant where a friend of mine ordered roasted Brussels sprouts, and they had sea salt, and they were roasted in the oven. And I sort of looked at them warily, like, you ordered Brussels sprouts. Why would you do that? And then I tried one, and it was delicious. Right. And so to put this analogy a little bit more further, I'm not saying, right, that we need to cheapen our content, that we need to make our programs, we need to dumb them down or anything along those lines. I'm just saying, how can we cook the outside of what we're already doing so it still has the healthy, nutritious inside, but it's cooked in a way that our audience is going to resonate with, right? I think it's too easy to sit back and go, we're doing great stuff. People just don't get it. Not that people don't get it. We have to bring it to them. It's our job to communicate it in a way that resonates with them and in a way that they can understand and engage, right? We have to understand what their biases are, the way they're built, not their tongues and their stomachs, but their minds, and engineer our content, engineer our pitches, engineer our messages, engineer the way we present information in a way that will be more engaging to them. And so I'll talk about a few things today. I'll talk about how you make our messaging tastier by understanding the science of word of mouth and social transmission, right? How can we get people to essentially become advertisements for our stuff? How can we get the youth that are in our programs already, the people that are showing up, how can we turn them into mouthpieces, advocates, channels for the great stuff we're doing? How can we get them to tell more people about us? Second, how can we better frame our outreach and engagement material by understanding why people talk and why they share? And third, how can we use word of mouth to help teens learn more about our programs? But before we get there, one more question from me. Here are 3 products or brands that most of you have probably heard about before. On the left, we have Walt Disney World, self-described place where dreams come true. In the middle, we have Honey Nut Cheerios, the wonderful and delicious breakfast cereal. And last but not least, we have Scrubbing Bubbles. I don't know if all of you know what Scrubbing Bubbles is. You may not, but it's a very effective bathroom cleaner. If you had to guess, which of these 3 products or brands do you think gets the most word of mouth? Is it Disney? Is it Cheerios? or is it scrubbing bubbles? What do you think? Let me see a show of votes in the chat. So I'm seeing a lot of Disney, almost all Disney, some scrubbing bubbles here and there, maybe a Cheerios or two, but almost all Disney, overwhelmingly Disney, over 75, 80% Disney. Okay. I want to point out a couple things from this exercise. First, you've never been asked this question before, right? Which of these 3 products or brands gets more word of mouth? But that's actually not important. You've never been asked which of 3 things gets more word of mouth, period, right? We have dozens, if not over 100 conversations every day about products and services and ideas. And those conversations have a big impact on what people do, on what the listeners to what we're saying do. Right? The things people hear us talk about, so we'll talk about in a couple minutes, $1 spent on word of mouth goes 10 times as far as $1 spent on traditional advertising. We listen to peers much more than we listened to paid or owned media, right? We pay attention to what others say, and it impacts us in a powerful way. Yet we as organizations, yet we as change agents often pay not enough attention to word of mouth. We often don't think about what people talk about and share. And second, if we had to guess, quick show of hands, how many of you said Disney? It's almost everybody. Great guess. Unfortunately, it's wrong. Quick show of hands, how many of you said scrubbing bubbles? Right, some of you said scrubbing bubbles. Also great guess, also wrong. The answer is Cheerios, the one that almost none of you guessed. And my point here is really simple. There's a lot of hype out there around word of mouth, around social media, around viral marketing, around why people talk and why they share. But if we don't understand the science about why people talk about and share some things rather than others, it's going to be really hard to get people to share our stuff. Deidre, looks like you, a couple other people got it. Give yourself a little pat on the back if you said Cheerios. Congratulations, you guessed it right. But my point here is broader than just guessing this. We don't work for Cheerios or Disney or scrubbing bubbles. We don't care about which one of these 3 wins, but we care about getting more attention to our programs. And if we don't understand why people talk and share, it's going to be really hard to do that, because we're going to have to reach each person who ends up doing our programs. Whereas if we could get people to talk and share, we don't have to reach those people. Their friends can, right? Word of mouth is a really powerful tool, and it's particularly powerful because it's free. We don't have to spend more money to have more impact with our messages. We've just got to understand why people talk and why they share. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. As was nicely mentioned, I'm Professor Jonah Berger. I'm a marketing professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. What I'm going to do today in that sort of hour and a half we have together is give you a brief tour of my recent New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, Contagious. It's all about the science of word of mouth, why we talk and why we share. I would love to be a social media guru. Apparently, all you need to do to be a social media guru is to have a theory. You don't have to collect any data to see if that theory is correct. You just get to assume that that theory is correct. I'm not a guru. I'm an academic. We tend to be a little bit more boring, but we also tend to be a little bit more right. So what I'm going to do today is try to be equally right, but a little bit less boring. I'm not going to present tables with lots of statistics. I'm not going to put up study results from all the research we've done. We've looked at thousands of pieces of online content, tens of thousands of brands, millions of purchases around the world. Again and again, we see the same drivers of word of mouth coming up. At least Ricky has read the book before, so thank you, Ricky. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Sounds like you did, so don't believe me. Talk to Ricky and see what Ricky thought. But my point here is really simple. I want to give you guys a toolkit to help you generate more word of mouth, to help you generate more conversation, more engagement about the programs and initiatives and content that you put out there. If you're interested more in the research, all the papers, the academic papers with lots of tables and lots of statistics are up on my website. I found that is a great way to put an audience to sleep. So I'm not going to present statistics. I'm not going to present tables. I'm going to tell stories. Because as we'll talk about today, stories are the currency of conversation. But behind each of these stories is decades worth of research. I'm happy to go into any of the details of the research, how we reached our conclusions. And again, this is not a huge group. It's a relatively small group. And so I'm more than happy to ask questions and answer questions at any point in the talk. So please, I have the chat up next to me. That's why I'm looking to the side every once in a while. If you have any questions, please ask about how we reached our conclusions, how you can apply the ideas, and so on. We're not going to use breakouts today, but what we are going to do is pause after each principle and talk a little bit about how we can apply it. And so I'd really appreciate if some of you are willing to type hand in the chat. I'll call on you, unmute your mics, and be willing to share some ideas. But the goal here is to generate more conversation about the stuff we're doing. And I'm going to give you a toolkit of how to do that. Before I dive in, any questions before I dive into the content? Okay. I will keep the chat open, and if you have questions, feel free to ask, and I'll go back and forth in them while we talk. Oh, and one more thing I will mention. A lot of how we reached the conclusion of this research is using something called natural language processing, basically taking textual data and mining it for behavioral insights. So we've done things like look at New York Times articles to mine the text to understand why some articles make the most emailed list. We've looked at written content online to see what leads to longer reads, right? We want to post content online, we want people to read it, not just click on it. Some of it gets read, some of it doesn't. Why? Well, we have some answers based on analyzing how the text is written. We've looked at movie scripts and how they drive movie success, song lyrics and how they drive song success, a variety of domains to look at how textual content language shapes outcomes. I'm not going to talk about that in detail today. If that's something you're interested in, though, feel free to email me. I would be happy to chat more. And also, all the papers are up on my website. And also, in case you don't get a question today, you want to find out more, you can find me at J1Berger on Twitter, where I share a bunch of these types of ideas. Okay, so let's dive right in. And so it goes without saying that word of mouth is more impactful than advertising. I teach at the Wharton School. I find that when I say something, MBAs sometimes take notes, but when a major consulting firm says something, they all put their heads down and they all take notes. So none other than McKinsey has pointed out that word of mouth generates more than twice the sales of traditional advertising. And you're probably saying, well, we don't care about advertising, right? We don't do television ads or radio spots or print campaigns. Or if we do, we only do them at a very small scale, right? But it's not just advertising. It's any piece of paid or owned media. And in case that language isn't familiar to you, what do I mean by paid media? Paid media is what we think of when we think of advertising. We pay someone else to leverage their channel, right? We pay a television show, a radio campaign, a digital, whatever it is. We pay Facebook to have our messages show up on their content. That's paid. Owned is our own channels, right? Our website, our social media feed, right? Anything we create ourselves. And we might say, well, hold on, right? People trust us, right? I mean, we're not a not-for-profit organization. We're out to help people. We give things away. Why wouldn't people trust us? Let me tell you, they don't trust you as much as they trust their peers, right? In addition, there's a host of organizations that are all doing great work, just like you were doing, that are competing for people's attention. Right? There are things about the environment, there are things about financial literacy, there's a host of different things out there that are competing for attention. A lot of times I work with pro-social organizations, they say, we're doing good work, that should be enough. Unfortunately, that's not enough, right? And marketing is not a dirty word. We have to be able to sell our ideas to make them have impact. We've got to understand how ideas resonate and how we can communicate to make them have impact. And so one question then is, well, why is word of mouth so much more impactful than things that come from us or things that come from ads? Why is word of mouth more impactful than those things? Any idea? There are kind of two key reasons. Any idea what one of those reasons might be? Two key reasons why word of mouth is more impactful than paid or owned media. And I'll put paid and owned, by the way, in the chat so you have it. And Ricky, by the way, I saw you had a question. I'm going to come back to it. So I saw trust. Amy, can you unmute yourself and say a little bit more about what you mean by trust?
Yeah, I think we trust the people that are in our lives and a lot of other areas of life and other decision making. They might be folks that have helped us make decisions in the past or that we know are similar to us in some way. And so their opinion ends up mattering more.
And you don't trust ads?
Oh, I think we, have an assumption that the ad is trying to trick us into something, or, I think we come at media with a perspective that they don't have our best interest at heart, but our friends and family probably do.
Okay. And what about so-called owned media, right? Like what about content on an organization's website or information that organization points out? Do you think we trust that information?
I think maybe somewhere in the middle. I think without having a personal relationship with the organization, we probably tend to put them in the bucket of somebody that's trying to sell us something or, encourage us to respond to their interests instead of our own.
Yeah, and sorry, Amy, to put you in the hot seat. I enjoy asking this question because everyone goes, yeah. Consumers don't trust ads. People don't trust ads. People don't trust things that come from organizations. But they trust our stuff. I mean, they don't trust those other organizations, but they trust us, right? I mean, they trust us, right? Let me unpack that a little bit. So first, let's pick ads. I'm going to pick on shampoo ads here for a second because it's easy to see, but then I'm going to take it to the more sort of nonprofit or social good world, right? And so think about the last shampoo ad you've seen, right? Basically, every shampoo ad is the same. There's a man or a woman. They use the shampoo, right? And they have long or short flowy hair. They use the shampoo, and then they get an attractive spouse, right? You've never seen a shampoo ad where someone uses a shampoo and gets an ugly spouse because no one would buy that shampoo. And basically, every version of paid or owned media is some version of that. Paid media, the stuff always looks great. Restaurants, the food looks good. Travel destinations, the kids are always having a fun time. No one looks bored, unhappy. I would love to travel on the airline that United Airlines puts up in their ads. I've never been on that plane. That plane looks delightful. Right, the steward or stewardess is happy to see you and brings you a drink and is happy to give you a refill in your water and isn't rude, and they don't lose your bag, and the Wi-Fi actually works. I've never been on that plane, but let me tell you, it looks delightful, right? Ads always show a varnished picture of the truth. And I think we all know that, and Amy nicely articulated that. But notice the same thing is true with our messages. And you would say, well, hold on, we're not trying to sell people anything. We're just trying to get them to adopt our programs, right? But the listener, the viewer, the observer, right, the audience is looking at a message going, of course you would say your content is good. It's your audience, it's your organization. Of course you would say this problem is important. Of course you will say I'm going to learn a lot. But how do I actually know that I can trust you? No organization says, yeah, our content's going to be super boring. Like it's going to be an hour and a half worth of material. But let me tell you, about 8 minutes in, you're going to want to turn off your Zoom thing and you're going to want to go to sleep because it was so boring that it will put you to sleep. Right? No one's going to say that. They're going to say it's engaging and it's fun and exciting. You're going to love it and you're going to learn all these things. The content may be good, but some people's content is not so good. And so the audience doesn't know whether they can trust us or not. But their peers, as Amy nicely said, we can trust our peers because our peers will tell it to us straight. They'll say, hey, I took one of those programs. I learned a lot. I took a lot away from it. Or, hey, I took one of those programs and yeah, I learned a little, but I didn't like this part. Because they'll say what they both liked and disliked, we're much more likely to trust our peers. So the first benefit is trust. But the second benefit of word of mouth is a little more nuanced. That's the targeting benefit of word of mouth. How do we find the right potential ways to target our audience? Right? How do we find the right channels to meet them? Maybe we put up posters in certain places. Maybe we put up online ads, or we send out emails, or we put things up in schools. We try to find ways to find the people, right? But as we've talked about, they may ignore those messages. What if we could find people who knows them better than we do? And that's exactly what word of mouth does. It goes through a social network, almost like a searchlight, to find the person or people that will find information most relevant, right? A couple of years ago, I got a free book in the mail. Academics often get free books from publishers. They send them to us with the hopes that we'll assign them to our students and they'll sell more copies in the process. But this time they didn't send me one book. They sent me two. And it wasn't two different books. It was two copies of the exact same book. And I remember sitting there and going, well, what's with the second book, right? Someone must have made a mistake. And sure enough, they didn't make a mistake. There was a note in the back of one of the books that said, hey, Professor Berger, we think you'll like this book, but we think you'll also know someone else who will like this book. Pass the second copy on to them. And that's the first very simple hack I'm going to share with you today. How by turning, and I'll use the word customers, right? You might think of them as audience members, you might think of them as teens, you might think of them as youth, whatever word you want to use. How can we turn them into advocates? And by doing that, can we get them to share our message? Because I didn't give that book out randomly. I passed it to the person in my office that I thought would find it most interesting and most relevant. If you don't have a baby, no one tells you has a website for baby clothes. If you don't like spicy food, no one tells you about an Indian restaurant, really spicy curries. They pick what to share with you based on what they think you will find interesting. And so because of that, word of mouth is much more targeted than paid or owned media, right? If we can get our audience to share, if we can get our audience to pass our stuff on, they'll help us find other people that will find it useful, right? And this is also true because of the notion of homophily. People tend to be friends with other people like them, right? If you're a 45-year-old that loves watching basketball, you probably know other people that like watching basketball. you're an 18-year-old, you probably know other 18-year-olds, right? If you're an 18-year-old, you're worried about getting pregnant, or you're trying to think about, the best ways to have good relationships with partners, you probably know a lot of other people that are dealing with exactly those issues. And so not only if we can turn our audience into advocates, can we get them to do the targeting for us, but they'll know the perfect audience for our message because they're friends with them, right? Let me give you one more example of this. A couple of years ago, Uber sent out an email to many of their users saying, hey, having a holiday party, request free rides for your guests here. Now, that's really nice of Uber, right? Very nice of them. But guess why else they did that? Let me see in the chat. Why else might have Uber sent out this note? Sure, it's nice of them to give away free rides, but why else? Sure, free advertising, but more than just free advertising. Gets new people to try Uber, lets others know, right? It gets the right people. I'm sitting there, I'm Uber. I don't know who's going to like Uber. I could spend a bunch of money on advertising, or I could say, hey, Uber user, you like my service. You probably know someone else who likes my service, right? Because friends tend to be friends with others that are like them, right? And that's exactly what this campaign did, right? Leveraging our social ties to generate conversation. And so hopefully at this point, I've convinced you of the value of word of mouth. Now let's talk about how to get it, right? And usually when we think about getting word of mouth, we think online. We think about Facebook and Twitter and blogs. Oh, sorry, one thing before I get there. I promised I would answer. There's a question in the chat. Someone had asked, let me just go up here to see what it was. Someone had asked, I think, why Cheerios is shared more among friends. Good question. You got to wait about a half hour. I promise I'll get there, but we're going to talk about that when we get to triggers in the talk. So you got to stay tuned. You will find out in a couple minutes. So going back to what we were talking about. So when we think word of mouth, we think online. We think about Facebook, we think about Twitter, we think about LinkedIn, we think about blogs, we think about online reviews. If you had to guess from 100%, all of it, all the way down to 0, none of it, what percent of word of mouth would you guess is online? 100% all the way down, would you guess is online? Let me see a couple guesses in the chat. I see 100%, 80%, 50%, 67%, 90%, 65, 50, 30, 15, 88, lots of great numbers. If I had to guess the average here, I'd put the average around 60. And it's clear why we think there's a lot of word of mouth online, right? We go, oh, the kids are on their phones so often, and technology, and there's, all these pieces of content online. Most word of mouth must be online. But if you look at the data, you actually look at the numbers, only about 7 to 10% of all word of mouth is online. I want to be really careful. Not 7D, not 17, but 7. 7% to 10% of all word of mouth is online. Is that number higher among young people? It is. It's closer to 15 to 20%. Nowhere near the 50 to 60% that you might think. Is it higher in the pandemic? Yes, it is. In the pandemic, it's around 15 to 20% also, right? It'll go back once the pandemic is over. But most word of mouth is offline. Face-to-face with friends and family members, on the phone, calling people that you know and like. Word of mouth and social media are not synonyms. Social media is a channel through which word of mouth flows, but social media is not the only channel through which word of mouth flows. Many organizations I work with, when they hear that, they go, God, that makes a lot of sense, but why are we investing so much in social media? And I often say, well, that's a really good question. Because it's not that social media is not a valuable channel through which word of mouth flows. It's not that it's not a valuable way to reach an audience, right? It is, but it's not the only way to reach the audience. And by focusing so much on the technology, we forgot about something much more important, the psychology. Why are people talking and why are they sharing? If we don't understand why they're talking, why they're sharing, we can have tens of thousands of friends and followers and social connections, but it won't matter. We have to get them to engage with our stuff, right? This is a meme that somebody shared to put in the talk. It doesn't matter how many connections we have, right? It matters whether people share our stuff. So how can we get people to share our stuff? Well, 10 years ago, if you typed on Google, you typed in what makes online content viral, you would have gotten back one word, cats. What makes online content viral? Cats. There are cat videos, there are cat pictures. Icon has cheeseburger. I'm in your fridge eating your foods. LOL cats. People love cats, right? Cats make things go viral. It's a great theory. Unfortunately, it's wrong. Not only doesn't it tell us which cat stuff is more likely to be shared, but it doesn't tell us why some cat things are shared more than factors. And so rather than talk about cats, let's focus on science. I've looked at tens of thousands of pieces of online content, tens of thousands of brands, millions of purchases around the United States and around the world. Again and again, we see the same 6 factors come up. In Contagious, I put those 6 factors in a framework called the STEPS framework. That stands for social currency, triggers, emotion, public, practical value, and stories. Each of these is a psychological driver of why we talk and why we share, and leads all sorts of information and ideas and content to spread. It's not about certain verticals or certain domains. It's not about certain areas of life and not others. It's about the psychology of why we share, right? And so today I'll talk about recruiting youth into programs, and I'll talk about why youth share program-related content, but I'm going to talk about a much broader thing that underlies that. If we just focus on the content that we create and don't understand why people share, it's going to be really hard to create effective content. I'm going to talk about why people share more generally, some principles that folks in a variety of different domains have used, and then we'll talk about how we can apply those ideas. And I've worked with hundreds of companies and organizations, nonprofits, for-profits, to apply these concepts. We can apply them here. I'll show you examples of things in related domains that have worked and have been very effective. But more importantly, I'll teach you the science, right? So that you can use it even outside of our conversation today. We may not have time to get into all 6 steps. I want to have time to get into each in depth. And so I'll definitely talk about social currency. I will definitely talk about triggers. We'll see where we are on time when we get to emotion. I may talk about public. I will certainly talk about stories. And at the end, I'll save some time for questions. But again, I also want to take questions during. And we're going to pause at the end of each principle and talk about how to apply the concepts. And so please think about other examples that you can think of the concepts and ways that we could apply them. Before we get there, a couple quick notes. And please, by the way, if you have any questions so far, please type them in the chat. I'm about to go into the framework. So if you have any questions on word of mouth, online versus offline, anything at all, now's a great time to ask. Anyone recognize what this is on the screen? Yes, ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, right? You guys might remember that from a few years ago. Got raised over $100 million for ALS. Great example of sort of viral content. And so I can't tell you the number of nonprofit organizations, social good organizations I work with that see something like this and they go, we've got to do something exactly like this. Right? We've got to do our own version. And I see a couple folks in the chat asking about the slides. I'm happy to share the slides. I actually don't think, though, that will be the most useful to you guys. Even before this talk, actually, I shared the slides with the group, and I got a little bit of pushback saying there are a lot of pictures, but not words. Can you put more words on the slide? So I would suggest checking out the resources that are here. There's a workbook on applying the content. There's a one-pager with the steps, and a bunch of sort of content you can download and work on with your teams to apply the ideas. I'm happy to share the slides as well, but they don't have as many words as some of you guys might like, and so you might find those resources a little bit more useful, but completely up to you guys. So going back to the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. So we see things like this and we think we need to do the same thing. If we could just make a viral video, all right, then we'd be successful. Right? If we could just make a viral video about pregnancy prevention and teens would just share it and everyone would want to take our content and that would be great. Right? I can't count the number of meetings I've been into where someone raised their hand and goes, we should make a viral video. Like all you do is you just go out, you buy a viral video and you're done. That is clearly not going to work. It's also not going to work because viral is often a flash in the pan. It's here today and gone tomorrow. Right? Do you remember the song, What Does the Fox Say? You might remember this from a couple of years ago. What does the fox say? Do, 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 do. Right? This was hugely popular, like a whole week, maybe a week and a half. And then we'd never heard from those folks again. Why? Because we don't want a viral video, right? We don't want something that's really popular for a day or a week or a couple of days and then gone again. Instead, we want each one to reach one. Right? Often, there's some viral thing that comes up and everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon, right? When the Ice Bucket Challenge came out, I had dozens of clients send me emails saying, hey, what can we do to do some version of this? You know what we should do? We should get people to squirt each other with ketchup and mustard and then videotape it and they'll send it to their friends and then it'll raise money. By the way, if you think that idea is terrible, that was not the worst idea I heard. That was one of the better ones. right? If we don't understand why these things work, just copying them is not going to be successful. And further, our goal is not to make viral content. Our goal is each one reach one. Our goal is that each person that comes to one of our programs tells just someone else about it. Just one person, just one more person. If everyone who came told one other person, we'd be hugely happy, right? Because that's all we need. We need each one to reach one. And so keep that goal in mind. It's not about viral content. Steps will explain viral content, but it's about each one reach one, right? How can we make every poster, every program, everything we do more engaging so that people will share it? Second, I want to use one more example, and I wanted to pick a government example here because I think we have a notion that certain things are easy to get people to talk about, and other things are difficult to get people to talk about, right? So, oh yeah, hidden bars and Tesla cars and the newest iPhone and what Selena Gomez did this weekend. That's people would definitely share that stuff, but like our programs, it's just going to be hard to get people to share them, right? I think that's an intuition we have. Certain things are naturally remarkable. Others are challenging to get people to talk about. Okay. And I think we would put the TSA at the bottom of that list, right? The TSA is not a very exciting organization. How many followers do you think the TSA has on social media? You don't want to wary a guess how many followers they have on social media. Take a quick guess. How many followers do you think they have on social media? I think so. Anthony seems to know for sure. 1.2 million. It looks like Anthony checked. They have a lot of followers on social media. On many platforms, they have over 1 million followers. You say, but it's the TSA. Who would follow the TSA, right? Well, let me show you why people follow the TSA. Because they do things like this, right? They don't just post, hey, be careful. Pull out your ID card when you get to the front of the line. They post things that people tried to squeeze through the TSA. Here are a pair of diffused, not still active, hand grenades dressed up to look like tuxedos, little ducks in tuxedos. Here is an Edward Scissorhands or Freddy Krueger. I don't know what to call this. Arm thing, glove, whatever it might be, that shoots flames out the edge. Here's a post where someone tried to bring a brick through their trucked luggage or asked about whether they could bring a brick. And the TSA said, yeah, you can bring a brick in your check bag, no problem, right? You can bring a brick, right? The TSA has been able to engage millions of people online, not because the stuff they do is naturally remarkable, but they understand why people share in the first place, right? And so I'm not saying we need to do that. Humor may not be in the bag of things that we want to engage with, right? But we need to understand our audience. We need to stop just sticking with the same type of things organizations have been doing for decades, right? And assuming that information is what people want. They want information, right? But we have to make that information tastier by wrapping it in a shell they can understand and engage with. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you wonder why the TSA got 12,000 likes for a brick, we'll talk about why today, and hopefully you guys can have similar success. All right, any questions before I go further? Let me pause here for just a second. Feel free to type hand or question in the chat, or feel free to type in your question, anything at all. Okay. Well, if you have any, please go ahead and type them in along the way. And otherwise, I'll dive into the first principle. Again, we'll talk about this principle, and then I'll pause for a couple minutes. We'll talk about how we can apply it, and then we'll move on to the next principle. So I want to start by talking about a place in New York City. Okay, so imagine a pandemic is over. I know it's going to be a while, but imagine the pandemic is over. You're walking around the Lower East Side of New York City. Your stomach is rumbling. You got to get a bite to eat. When you notice a big hot dog shaped sign with the words "Eat Me" written on it in what look like mustard. Say, I haven't had a hot dog in a while. Let me check this place out. So you walk down a flight of stairs into a restaurant called Criff Dogs. Now, if you like hot dogs, you will be in heaven. Criff Dogs has every hot dog you can imagine. They have a good morning hot dog with bacon, eggs, and cheese, a hot dog with green onion and pineapple, traditional New York style water dog, every hot dog you can imagine. You finish your hot dog when you notice something unusual in the corner of the room. In this case, the corner of the screen. It almost looks like a phone booth, like one of those things that Clark Kent might jump into to change into Superman. So just for fun, you got a couple minutes, walk over to that thing, slide open the door, and walk inside. It's pretty cramped in there. the phone booth after all. But on the wall, you'll see something you probably haven't seen in 15, 20, maybe even 30, maybe even 35 years. Remember rotor dial phones? Remember those phones you had to stick your finger in and go around in a circle, right? Well, just for fun, stick your finger in the number 3, go around a circle, and hold the receiver up to your ear. Well, the phone will actually ring. It'll go ring, ring. Then someone will pick up the other line, and they'll ask you whether you have a reservation. Now, the first time I heard this story, I said, reservation? I'm in a phone booth out of a hot dog restaurant. What can I possibly have a reservation for? But if you're lucky, or they happen to have space, the back of that phone booth will open, and you'll be led into a place called Please Don't Tell. Now, Please Don't Tell is violated a number of traditional laws of marketing, traditional laws of communication. There's no sign on the street. There's no sign inside the restaurant. They've done everything they can to make themselves difficult to find. And yet every day they're full. 3 p.m., phone lines open up. By 3:30, all the seats are gone. People at redial again and again trying to get through. It looks like a couple of your colleagues, by the way, Rainey and Maud, looks like they have gone there before. It took me 2 weeks to get into this place. Calling again and again. Finally got it on a Tuesday night, like 7:30, not the most popular time. How did they cut through the clutter? Not lack of competition, right? There are dozens of really engaging places all around New York City in a couple block radius. How did they cut through the clutter? Well, they did something really interesting. They made themselves a secret. Let me tell you a little secret about secrets. Think about the last time someone told you something and they told you not to tell anyone else. And it wasn't like a really important health secret or something like that. It was just sort of something, it was sort of a funny secret or something along those lines. What's the first thing you then did with that information? Someone told you something they told you not to tell anyone else. What's the first thing you then did with that information, right? As a couple, you were noting in the chat, right? If you tell someone not to tell people something, what they often do is tell people about it, right? And that's exactly what happens at Please Don't Tell. They do everything they can to make it a secret. And on your way out, they give you a little card that says, don't tell anyone. Well, maybe just tell a couple people, right? Because having access to information that not everyone else knows makes you look smart and makes you look in the know. It gives you what I'll call social currency. Just like the car we drive and just like the clothes we wear, the things we talk about and the things we share affect how other people see us. And so one way to make ourselves look good, right, is to make, like one way to get people to talk about us, our programs, our initiatives, our stuff, is to make them look good, right? Too often we're focused on us. We say, oh, how does the poster we put up or how does the advertisement for our content, how does it look, right? The better it looks, we have to make sure everything is exactly right because as long as it looks exactly right, people want to do it. We focus a lot on ourselves. We don't focus enough on our audience. People don't care about us. They care about themselves. The better we can make them look, the more likely they'll be to talk and the more likely they'll be to share, right? So let's spend a couple minutes talking about this idea. And I see, by the way, we're having an active discussion in the chat about the name of this place, which is great. And I'll get to the point of that in just a second. So I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. Her name is Carla. And this is a picture of her car. And I want to see how much you could guess about her based on this one piece of information. So you had to guess, for example, how old would you guess that Carla is? How old might you guess that Carla is? 25, 30, 35, 30, 45, 40. If I ask for a quick show of hands, how many people would say between 30 and 47? Probably all of you. Does she have kids? Yes. They play sports? Yes. What sport do they play? Soccer, field hockey, soccer, football. Yeah. So you don't know Carla, but you made these inferences because choices communicate information. Car we drive, also the clothes we wear, right? I thought a lot about what to wear to come see you guys today. I'm sorry we can't be in person. If we were in person, I would be wearing a sport coat. We are not, so I'm not wearing a sport coat, but I am wearing a collared shirt. Why? Because I recognize that that is a way to show that you are professional in a Zoom meeting. Right? Every time I'm wearing a collared shirt, when I go downstairs, my 3.5-year-old goes, Daddy, you're wearing a collared shirt. Did you talk to people on the computer? Right? He knows that I don't usually wear a collared shirt. I usually wear a t-shirt. I usually wear a t-shirt or sweatshirt, pretty much the same t-shirt or sweatshirt now that we're working from home many days. But he knows that when I'm wearing a collared shirt, I must be talking to people on the computer, right? Because I dressed up for this because that's the way we show that we're professional. But it's not just the car we drive and it's not just the clothes we wear. The stuff we talk about and the stuff we share has a big impact on how other people see us. Right? Have you ever wondered why most posts on social media are positive, Look at me, I met a celebrity. Look at me, I went to this really cool place. Look at me, I bought a new car. Look at me, I got promoted. Nobody posts, hey, look at me, I'm at the office, working on an Excel spreadsheet. Check out column C. I don't know about you, most of us spend more time working on Excel spreadsheets than we do on vacation, yet we would share the vacation photo and not share the Excel spreadsheet. Why? Because we pick and choose among the things that happen to us, share the ones that make us look good, and avoid sharing the ones that make us look bad, right? The better something makes us look, the more likely we are to share it, right? Your friends do that, your colleagues do that, kids do that, everyone does that. The question is, how can we harness that motivation? How can we build on that motivation to look good to their peers and use that to get them to talk about and share our stuff? And so I talk about 4 ways to do it in the book. I won't be able to talk about them all today, but I'll talk about a couple. One is, how can we make people feel like insiders? How can we make them feel smart, feel special, feel in the know, like they're not like everybody else? Right? Please Don't Tell did a great job of this, right? A place hidden inside a hot dog restaurant. Everyone, right? I saw many of you, what I loved about in the chat is everyone wanted to know the name of this place, right? Why? Because you want to tell other people about it. Why? Because it makes you look good. The better, the more you know about stuff that not everyone else knows, the more likely you are to talk about it and share it, because it gives you that social currency, right? You may not live in New York, but telling your friend that lives in New York about this place that you know makes you look cool, right? Even when I put the picture up there about it, what I loved is at least 2 of your colleagues jumped on it right away, showing they knew what it was, showing that they have that social currency, right? But it's not just them, right? And it's not just this place. Lots of organizations do this all the time. Let me give you a couple examples. So a few years ago, I did a project with LinkedIn. LinkedIn wanted people to talk about the website and bring in new users. But what they realized is no one cares about the website, right? People aren't going to post about how much they love LinkedIn because LinkedIn isn't that exciting thing to talk about, right? So what could they do to get people to talk about and share LinkedIn? And so they tried a different approach. Rather than talking about themselves, how great LinkedIn is, they talked about their members. They sent someone like Lisa, for example, an email saying, hey, Lisa, congratulations. You have one of those viewed profiles on LinkedIn. Now, Lisa felt pretty good, but guess what else she did? Any idea? Guess what else Lisa did besides just feel good? She shared it, right? Tens of thousands of people posted this content. Why? Because status is only good if other people know that you have it. People love getting status. People love being gifted status. People love feeling like they're high status. But status is only good if other people know that you have it. And so Lisa and tens of thousands of people like her shared this online, right? Not because she cares about LinkedIn. She could care less about LinkedIn, but she knows it'll make her look good to her peers, right? But notice what happens. LinkedIn comes along for the ride. Anytime you give out awards, anytime you give out recognition, Lisa can't just say, hey, I'm influential on LinkedIn. She has to say something like, hey, I have one of those 1% top viewed profiles on LinkedIn for 2012. She's talking about LinkedIn, right? Buildings that say, oh, we're LEED certified. Buildings love to tout their environmental certifications, right? But they're mentioning the organization that does those certifications. Car brands love to say how they're JD Power and Associates, Best Buy, or Consumer Reports, Best Buy, but they're talking about Consumer Reports or Best Buy along the way. Anytime we give people recognition, they talk about it. Again, an example from a completely different domain, but Burberry a few years ago said, hey, take a picture of yourself wearing Burberry clothes, send it in, and we'll post some of them on our website. And if they post a picture of you wearing the Burberry clothes on their website, what's the first thing you're going to do when you find out about that? What's the first thing you would do? Tell everybody, right? Share with everybody. You tell everyone, look at me, I'm on the Burberry website, right? Burberry's not talking about themselves. They're making their audience look good. Better we can make our audience look good, more likely they'll be to share it. Another example of this, Beyonce a few years ago comes out with a new album, no advertising. She just puts a picture up online because she knows people want to be the first one to tell everyone else about it. Right? Oh my God, did you know this new album's coming out, right? Rather than spending all that money on advertising, she let her followers be the first ones to share it, right? And because they shared it first, they get to look good to their peers. You ever notice what the first comment on most YouTube videos says? What does the first comment on most YouTube videos say? Does it say, I love this video, I hated this video? Nope, Mia's right. It says first comment, first, I got here before you, right? People love being early. People love being first. Let's leverage that motivation. How can we make people feel smart, feel special, feel in the know, like they're not like everybody else, right? How can we make them feel, often organizations do things like they have open access webinars, open access content, everyone can get access to it. Okay, but that makes it feel like it's not very special, right? Somebody used this word earlier. Where was it? I want to call them out by name because yeah, Janet, very nice to use the word exclusivity. Scarcity and exclusivity are two great ways to get people engaged in things, right? If something feels scarce, not everyone has it, there are not that many of it, well, then I want it, right? Because having access to it makes me look good. If it's exclusive, it's not about the number of things available, right? It's about sort of getting over a barrier to entry, right? If something feels exclusive, it seems more desirable. And I want to be careful here. I recognize you're sitting here going, well, are you saying we shouldn't let many people in our programs? That's not exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying we need to leverage scarcity and exclusivity to make people feel special. I'll give you an example. I ordered a pair of shoes a number of years ago from Zappos. Online retailers sell shoes. When you order shoes from them, you usually get an email that says, hey, they'll be there in 2 or 3 days, whatever it is. So this time I got an email saying, hey, you special customer, you're such a great customer. We're going to send you these shoes tomorrow. Now, I would love to think that I'm the most special, great customer in the world, but I don't actually think that's the case. In this case, I think it just happened to be in a warehouse near my house, and so they could get it to me tomorrow. But the way they framed it made me feel special. It made me go, oh, cool. Like, I got this special thing from Zappos. And because I felt special, I'm more likely to talk about it. Not scarce, it's not exclusive. They could have sent everyone that exact same email, right? But the way they framed it wasn't just like, here's something, everyone gets it, right? They framed it as this is this valuable thing that only special people get. And because you're a special person, we're going to give it to you. And anytime somebody feels like a special person, they share that status because status is only good if other people know that you have it, okay? So let's pause here for a second. I was told we shouldn't do breakout groups, so I'm not going to do breakout groups, but I'd like to have a large group discussion. What are some other examples, good examples of applying social currency? Examples you've seen where organizations have gotten people to share stuff by making those people look good, by no longer focusing on themselves, how great we are, but focusing on their audience. Let's start there, and then we'll talk about applying this concept to something that you're working on. So what are some other examples of social currency? Either type hand in the chat, I'll call on you, or you can type examples in. So Michelle, can you say a little bit more about what you posted?
Yeah, so Chewy.com is a service that sends people, it's like you can buy pet products. And so a while ago they sent a whole bunch of people portraits of their pets. But in order to get portraits of your pets, obviously they had to know a lot about your pet. So it was to people who had really interacted with them a lot and filled in profile stuff a lot.
Yep. And those people feel really special, right? Oh my God, this is so, like they painted Fido. Oh my God. And then if Chewy paints your dog or pet, you're going to share it with everybody, right? I want to note, by the way, that this is pet food. Again, not the most amazing product category. If I had said earlier, hey, could pet food leverage social currency? You would have said no, but Michelle had a great example of that, right? Coca-Cola has done something similar with their bottles. Right? Put people's names on the bottle. You walk into a store, you see your name on the bottle, you see your best friend's name on the bottle. You're going to check it out. You're going to take a picture of it. You're going to talk about it because someone else is special, right? Pepperidge Farm used to do the same thing with Goldfish. Send in a picture of your kid. We'll put their picture on Goldfish packages, making them feel special. Larry, you mentioned club entry. Can you say a little more?
So yeah, like when you are going out and they have a particular type of guest list, and then if you get your name on the list, they normally will allow you to have a +1 or like a guest that goes along with that. And so that's all they have to do is get a few people on this private list, and then that few people are automatically going to, because of that social currency, invite 2 of their friends and so on and so on.
Yeah. Let's unpack that for a minute. Larry's exactly right, but let's unpack that. Imagine if they said, hey, there's an event, everyone can come in, it's completely free. Come on. How good do you think that event is? Say, oh, I guess it's fine. Maybe if I have time, I'll go. Whereas event emails you and say, hey, this event is usually $200 to get into, But because Larry, because you're such an amazing guy, we're going to let you get in VIP. And by the way, you can bring 2 people with you. Well, 1, you definitely sign up. And 2, you definitely bring people with you because you want to show them how much of a VIP you are, right? By framing that event in a different way, they make people feel like it's desirable and make them want to get into it. I don't know if any of you live in California, but if you've ever been to In-N-Out, you may recognize that In-N-Out has a secret menu. What does that mean? So In-N-Out usually serves hamburgers, cheeseburgers, milkshakes. But what they do is if you come in, you say, hey, I'd like a 2x2 or a 4x4, not on the menu, yet they will make it for you. Makes you look like an In-N-Out insider. There's a secret menu. You can order off the secret menu, makes you feel special, but makes you want to talk about it because you don't get that status unless you talk about it, right? McDonald's done the same thing with the McRib. Right? The McRib is a limited time only in certain locations. So people go and they talk about the McRib to get that social currency. Edward, you said Nike does this every week. Can you mention a little bit more about what you're thinking about?
So with Nike, there's a sneaker app now. I'm a big I'm what they call a sneakerhead. So on the sneaker app, right, they release shoes, but it's only so many that you can get. There's only so many pair that they're gonna sell, especially with like Jordan's limited edition. So they'll drop this shoe once every so many years, or they only release so many pairs. So if you're not in that line, if you don't get that pair, it might be another year or 2 before you can even get that exact pair, or you're going to pay so much higher from a resale that, they do this every week with shoes. So I love Nike for that.
And so let's unpack that a little bit. First, there's scarcity, right? There's only so many of these shoes. Second of all, there's exclusivity, right? It's not that exclusive. You just have to have, it's like, I think the SNKRS app or whatever it is on your phone. I used to have it on my phone. I took it off, but it's a great way for Nike to engage with their customers. Those people get early in the line. I think there's tiers even within the app that get you kind of earlier in line. But it's making it feel scarce and exclusive, which makes those things more desirable. And people have often said, well, hold on, why doesn't Nike just charge a higher price for their shoes initially? Why do they let other people buy them and then mark them up? And part of the reason is they know if they make them scarce and exclusive and allow middlemen and middlewomen to come in and mark them up, there'll be more conversation around the shoes than if they were initially priced at $2,000 or $1,000 or whatever they are. Right? By leaning into that desirability and using it as a word of mouth tool, it generates a lot more conversation for the regular shoes that many of us would buy at an East Bay or Foot Locker or other places, right? It spills over and benefits the other things. Someone mentioned Supreme, same thing as Supreme, right? Supreme does shoe drops and other ways of sort of generating attention for what they're doing. I'll talk about another example. A few years ago, so the opening example of Contagious, the book, is $100 cheesesteak. So I talk about a cheesesteak in Philadelphia that costs $100. It's a really decadent cheesesteak. It's got lobster and Kobe beef and all these different things. And it's a great example of social currency because people love talking about this thing if they've gotten to have it. So a music artist, Nipsey Hussle, who's no longer with us, read the book, loved the idea, and came out with a $100 mixtape. Right? What he realized is, look, when people are getting music, they're not just into the music itself, they're interested in what the music says about them. So he released a limited edition. There was only 1,000 made. They each cost $100. They were signed. I believe Jay-Z bought, I think, 100 of them or something like that. It made $100,000 in a couple hours, right? Because people didn't just want the music. They wanted the signal of what having access to that music did. And so we can think about lots of examples to this. Why I like this concept of social currency is we can think about everything from high-end clothes to McDonald's, right? Anyone can leverage these principles. And so hopefully you guys are getting a sense of this isn't something that's restricted to a particular area. Now let's take the second question on the screen. How can we apply this concept to something that we're working on, right? How can we use this idea to make youth more interested in taking our programs, interested in talking our programs, taking our programs? How can we use this to generate word of mouth? And I'm not expecting everybody to have thoughts right off the bat, because I know this is something that may take more time to develop. But any thoughts you've seen or thoughts you've had so far, or ways you can think about sort of things in analogous areas that might be useful to borrow? Any ideas? I'm also happy to come to this back to this later. I don't want to put people on the spot, but so club t-shirts, only certain numbers of slots, right? available? Could we offer fun and exclusive experience for the first ones who participate in the program? Certainly. Raffle off items related. I also think a lot about, where my family lives, they have block captains. And my dad, I came home one time and my dad was like, oh, I'm a block captain. I'm like, what does it mean to be a block captain? Block captain doesn't mean a lot. You sort of watch over your block. You're supposed to take care of people. But block captains love talking about being a block captain because you've given them status, right? And you can think about the same thing here, right? How can we make people community captains, where they're captains of their community? They're in charge, nominally in charge, but sort of in charge of a region or an area where they feel responsible for folks, which will make them more likely to want to talk and share and more likely to distribute resources. By the way, people would also trust them a lot more than they trust us because it's coming from a peer rather than coming from us, right? And so I think, what smart organizations do is they don't want everything to come from them, right? Because it has to come from you. People are going to be less interested in doing it, and you have to do all the work. The more we can build a movement around what we're trying to do and have localized representation of that movement, sort of boots on the ground, where there's lots of groups in different places that are helping us and drawing attention to our content, the more effective we'll be. And so what can we give away to encourage these local community captains to want to participate and also help them rally support in their area, in their region, in their community, in their building, in their school, right? Give them the resources. We're the hub, but they're the spokes, right? Give them the resources to distribute all the content to different places rather than having everyone come to us. Award for youth, they would want to share online. Great idea, right? People love things they can put on their resume, right? If I was a community captain, that gives me something that makes me feel good, that helps you guys out, I can put it on my resume, make me feel proud. Youth Advisory Board, nice example, right? But how many people are on that board, right? I bet it's pretty few. Why don't we have advisory boards for each town, right? Why don't we have advisory boards for each region? We could do the same thing, replicating it at large, helping more people feel like they're part of this and have a vested stake in making it successful. Give them an insider badge also, right? And I recognize some of the stuff we're doing, people may not be proud talking about it or maybe a little reticent to talk about it. They may be worried it's embarrassing. They may be worried about repercussions from their friends. And so we can think about the right way to frame it. And there are certainly cases where people may not want to share everything, but the better we can make them look, the more likely they'll want to be to talk and share. Yeah, participation event at the end of the program, awards, parents, caregivers, an insider badge, certainly, right? And so all of these, we have to think about the details, but all of these are great, great directions. Any questions here? I'm going to move on to the next principle. And this is great. This is exactly the discussion where I was hoping to have. It's taken a little bit longer than I thought going through social currency would, but this is great. This is exactly the conversation I'm hoping that we would have. So, okay. And so just before I wrap up with social currency, one more just example of social currency, what I call finding the inner remarkability, right? Oh, let me say one thing because I saw something from Coach G. So Coach G says, what do you think of gift cards for participation? I'll ask you guys a question. What do you think about gift cards for participation? What do you guys think? Let me tell you a story. So imagine I'm moving this weekend, Coach G, and I said, hey, I need some help moving. I'm going to pay you to help me move. I'm going to pay you $1 million to help me move. Would you help me move? Coach G would probably say, yes, right? You pay me $1 million to help you move. What if I say I'd pay you 12 cents? Sorry, I'm busy this weekend, right? Right. And so when you start paying people to do things, first of all, it's expensive. You got to pay them to do it. And second of all, they're going to start thinking that the reason they're doing it is because you're paying them, not because they want to be there, right? Paying people is a great way to get them to show up in the short term. It is a terrible way to motivate engagement in the long term because extrinsic motivation, like money, often undermines intrinsic motivation, like the actual desire to, oh, Janet just said exactly what I was saying, right? If instead Coach G said, hey, look, I'm moving this weekend. We're friends. I'm going to order a couple pizzas. We'll play some music. Would you come over and help? He'd say, sure, yeah, why not? Right? Because I didn't make it about how much I was paying you. I made it about the social connection or something else. And so I'm not saying in the short term, rewards can't be a good way to get people to show up. Rewards in the short term will definitely get people to show up. I worry in the long term that it undermines that intrinsic motivation. Okay, so coming back to social currency and finding the inner remarkability. So I've sort of mentioned this a couple times. I previewed this a bit ahead of time. And Renee said, hey, we serve kids from lower socioeconomic families, can often really use them. I want to be careful. I'm not saying that those families can't use them. And I'm not saying it won't get people to turn up if there are gift cards. And if the only way you think you can get people to turn up is having gift cards, then that may be a good way in the short term. But what it does, it undermines they're less likely to say, I'm coming because I want to be there, and more likely to say, I'm coming because there's a gift card. And so if that gift card disappears, they're going to be less likely to come in the future. And so I would just be careful about using that as the main sort of bread and butter strategy to drive turnout. Not that it can't be good in the short term. It can be good in the short term, but it can be expensive and it can undermine long-term success. Okay, so I've made this point a few times already. Sort of, we think certain things are naturally remarkable, others are tough to get people to talk about. I want to pick a domain similar, different from you guys, but similar to you guys in another way. This is an organization, it's the New York Department of Health, that is trying to get people to stop drinking soda. Soda has a lot of sugar in it. Everybody knows that though. And so how can we get people to engage with that? And so they build a piece of content based on this. So let's check out what they do. Here we go. Pretty gross, pretty disgusting, quite memorable. And the next time you think about drinking a soda, I guarantee you're going to remember this piece of content, right? So this video has over 10 million views, goes viral on the internet. Many people share it. But what it also does is it takes something that's not very remarkable, we think is not very remarkable, sugar and soda, and it figures out a way to find the inner remarkability, right? To show people rather than tell. Anyone can say soda has a lot of sugar in it. Yeah, great, soda has a lot of sugar. Sure, I've heard it 1,000 times. This shows rather than tells, right? And I think too often we think if we just tell people something's a problem, if we tell people information, it will have an effect. We need to show people rather than tell them. And I'll come back to this at the end as well. Okay, let's talk about triggers next. And to talk about triggers, I want to use a message that many of us have seen before. How many of you have seen Geico's ad for Hump Day? Insurance company Geico, again, not the most engaging organization, builds a piece of content. There's an annoying camel walking in office going, what day is it today? What day is it? What day is it? Everybody ignores him. He's a very annoying camel. Finally, he comes across this poor woman and she goes, it's Hump Day. And the camel goes, woo, woo. And the ad goes, how happy are people who save money with Geico? Happier than a camel on Hump Day. Get it? Camels, humps, Hump Day. Okay. So you're probably going, oh, this is not that funny. I mean, it's funny when you see it on television, but it's not that funny. Yet this is the second most shared ad of a couple of years ago. Not a beer ad, not a car ad, but an insurance ad. And so why did so many people share a piece of content from a not very engaging industry, right? Well, I'm a data guy, dug a little deeper. This is what the share data looks like over time. Spike in shares, then it goes down, then another spike, then it goes down, then another spike, then it goes down. If you look closer, the spikes aren't random. They're 7 days apart. And if you look even closer, you'll notice that they're every, what do you think? Wednesday, or as it's colloquially known, Hump Day. This piece of content is equally good or bad every day of the week. It's good about on Monday, it's good about on Tuesday, it's good about on Wednesday. But Wednesday rolls around, provides a ready reminder, what a psychologist might call a trigger, to make people think about it and talk about it and share it. Because if something's top of mind, it's much more likely to be tip of tongue. Too often we think, do people like us? Say, do people like our programs? Do people like our services? Do people like our content? And we think if people like it, they will talk about it. But there's lots of stuff we like that we will never talk about because we're not thinking about it, right? There's a restaurant near wherever you live that you love eating at, but you never eat there because if you don't think about it when you're going to pick up food, you're not going to buy it. 70% of purchase is consideration. Are you thinking about it near the time of action? They did a great study a few years ago in the grocery store where they changed the music that played over the PA system. So some days they played French music, some days they played German music. What did they find? One days they played French music, sales of French wine went up. Days they played German music, sales of German wine and beer went up. The music changed what wine people liked? No, they still like whatever wine they liked. All it did was remind them to talk about it. Top of mind, more likely to be tip of tongue. Let's spend a couple minutes exploring this idea. So this goes back to the question one of your colleagues asked a little while ago now. They said, hey, why does Cheerios get more word of mouth than Disney World? So first of all, here's word of mouth about Cheerios by time of day. When do you notice about when people talk about Cheerios? When do they talk about Cheerios? Many people are saying it's in the morning, right? People talk about Cheerios in the morning. Notice how it's shifted to the right on the weekend? Any idea why? Because people wake up later, right? People talk about Cheerios. One reason they talk about Cheerios is when they eat Cheerios. You just eating Cheerios, you're more likely to talk about it. This is one of the reasons Cheerios gets more word of mouth than Disney. Disney's a great engaging experience. People love to go to Disney World. Right? When they come back, nothing they can do. The first 2 days, they love to talk about Disney World. But people don't go very often, and there's nothing to remind you of that experience. Where Cheerios is super boring, but people eat breakfast once a day, 365 days a year. And even if they don't eat Cheerios per se, they wheel their grocery cart through the aisle once a week. They see the brand, they think about it, and they're more likely to talk about it. And so top of mind, more likely to be tip of tongue. More triggers, more likely to be tip of tongue. But it's not just usage. If I said peanut butter and, what word might come to mind? Jelly, right? Most people are saying jelly. If I said milk and, you might think of? Most people would say cookies, right? It's almost like peanut butter is like a little advertisement for jelly. Almost like jelly should pay peanut butter a kickback or a referral fee every time peanut butter's around. Because if peanut butter's around, jelly doesn't have to remind you it exists. Peanut butter does all the work for jelly, right? Think about the brand Corona, right? Not Corona, the virus, but Corona, the beer. They've done a great job of linking themselves to the beach. When people go on a beach vacation, they can't stop thinking about Corona, right? They may not drink beer, they may not like Corona, but they think about it because the beach is Corona's trigger. Or said very simply, the beach is Corona's peanut butter, right? Even as Trina just said, Corona's and limes. We associate those things together. One reminds us of the other, even if it's not there. And so what I would ask you guys to think about at this point is, okay, what's your brand? What's the thing in the environment that's going to remind people of you, even if you're not around? Because you can put up notices about your content, send out emails, remind people about how great it is, or you can link it to something in the environment. And when they see it, they'll think of you, right? KitKat did a great job of this a few years ago. Sales were down by about 30%. People liked the brand, but they weren't buying it. So they linked themselves to coffee. Having a coffee break, have a KitKat. Thinking about coffee, think about KitKat. Coffee and KitKat, KitKat and coffee, best friends forever. If you're KitKat, why is coffee a really good trigger or really good peanut butter to link yourself to? Why coffee? It is a break. Sarah's right, it is a break. Why else? It's a daily beverage, right? Catherine's saying the same thing. It's crewed frequently, right? Lots of people drink it lots of times. More frequent triggers is better than less frequent triggers. Having people think about you more is better than having people think about you less. But it's not just about frequency. My favorite example of triggers is actually reusable grocery bags, right? So think about reusable grocery bags, right? Everyone has them somewhere in their house. Many of us forget to bring them to the grocery store. When do we remember that we haven't brought our reusable grocery bags to the store? What makes us think about that we forgot our bags? At the store, right? At the checkout line, oh, I forgot my bags. You're not going to go back home to get the bags to come back to the store, right? There's a trigger there. There's a peanut butter there, but it's too late, right? For people to think about their bags before they leave the home, right? There's got to be a trigger at the right point in time. And I would say the same thing more generally. So as we think about applying triggers, there are 4 key questions. First, who do we want to be triggered? Who is the target audience that we want to think about us? And there may be multiple audiences. But second, and even more importantly, when do we want them to think about us? If I'm a reusable grocery bag, you have to think about me before you leave the house, right? When is the right time for people to think about us and our content? What is around at that time, and how create a link to that thing? Those 4 questions, the who, the when, the what, and the how, will make sure we not only come to mind, but come to mind at the right time to drive action. It's not just how frequently we come to mind, it's coming to mind at the right time to drive action. We did a study a few years ago at Stanford University where we leveraged this principle. We wanted people to eat more fruits and vegetables. And so we measured their consumption over a 2-week period, and halfway in between, we gave them a slogan. And we A/B tested it. So some people got the slogan, live the healthy way, eat 5 fruits and veggies a day. And other people got the slogan, each and every dining hall tray needs 5 fruits and veggies a day. Okay. And we asked people, hey, do you like these slogans? Do you think they would work? The first slogan people loved. They thought it was really clever. They said it would definitely change their behavior. Second slogan, not so much. People heard it. They said, yeah, I don't really know if it would change my behavior. It's fine, but I don't think it would be very effective. But we didn't just ask people. We measured where it changed their behavior. We found something quite interesting. That first slogan, live the healthy way, eat 5 fruits and veggies a day, people thought it would be really effective. No change in fruit and vegetable consumption. People thought it would be effective, but it wasn't. The second slogan, each and every dining hall tray needs 5 fruits and veggies a day. People didn't like it, didn't think it was very clever, but it led to a 25% increase in fruit and vegetable consumption. Why was the second slogan so much more effective, even though people liked the first one a lot more? Yeah, I don't know who BSC01 is, but they're exactly right, right? So think about it, right? So what did students do before they got their food, right? Not because it's more directed, it's not because it's more memorable, right? When students get their food, they pick up a tray and they put their food on their tray. And so what the second slogan did is exactly what we talked about on the prior thing. Who do we want to be triggered? Students. When do we want to think about us? Okay, well, if I want them to eat fruits and vegetables, it's not going to help if they think about it during class. They need to think about it when they're eating food, okay? Around mealtime. What's around at that time? Well, they put their food on trays. I'll create a link to that thing, this ridiculous slogan that we came up with, right? Too often, we focus on slogans that are clever and sound really good, but aren't very effective because people don't remember them, right? And so to make things actionable, they've got to be triggered by the environment. It's not just about thinking about them, it's about driving behavior and reminding people at the right time to take action. So if we're trying to remind people, what can we link our stuff to in the environment, right? How can we link our messages and our ideas to something environment so that when they see those things, those triggers, those peanut butters, they remind people to take action. Okay, I am basically not at time here, but at where we were supposed to take questions. So I'm not going to talk about emotion. The idea here is when we care, we share. I'll let you guys read more about that in the emotions chapter. It's not just about positive and negative. Certain positive emotions decrease sharing and certain negative emotions increase sharing. So check out the resources I mentioned there. They should be helpful. I won't talk about public. The simple idea of public is easy to see, easy to imitate. People can only imitate what they can see others doing. And so how can we make things more visible? A la the white headphones that Apple often uses. Practical value is all about useful information, sort of news you can use. And last but not least is stories. And the idea of stories very simply, sort of out of time, is how can we wrap our message in an engaging story, right? Going back to the New York Department of Health, they could have said, hey, sugar, lots of sugar in soda. Don't drink soda. And everyone would have said, oh, okay, I hear you. I'm not going to share that. Right? Instead, they built a piece of content that's really engaging that carries the notion that soda has a lot of sugar along with it, right? Stories can be vessels or carriers of information, but they have to be good stories. They have to carry that information along for the ride. And so the question is, how can we make a story on the outside that's engaging, but carry our brand, our key attribute, our message along with it? So just to wrap up, today we talked about the 6 key steps to boosting word of mouth. We talked about social currency, how we can make people look smart, look special, look in the know, like they're not like everybody else. We talked about triggers, top of mind, tip of tongue. What's our peanut butter? What's the thing that will remind people of us, even when we're not there? Emotion is when we care, we share. Public, easy to see, easy to imitate. Practical value is all about useful information. And last but not least is stories. Right? When people put their kids to bed at night, nobody tells bedtime facts. They tell bedtime stories. Stories are the currency of communication, but certain stories are more effective than others. And so we have to build messages or ideas that carry our stuff along for the ride, stories that carry us along for the ride. Let me, 2 slides from me, and then I'll wrap up and take some questions. So please put any in the chat or type hand, and I'm happy to call on you. 2 key next steps from this talk. First, how can we find our kernel? What is the thing or things that we want people to share? It's not enough to say we want people to share. What do we want them to share? What is that thing or thing we're hoping they pass on. And then second, how can we apply the steps around it? How can we find our social currency? How can we figure out a Trojan horse story? How can we find our trigger or our peanut butter? In case it's helpful, there's a guide on my website that'll help you apply these ideas. Because good news, it's not random, it's not luck, and it's not chance. There's a science behind why people talk and why they share. If we understand that science, we can craft more contagious content, we can build more effective messages, and we get more people to sign up for our programs. Thank you guys so much. I hope you found these concepts useful, and I would love to take any and all questions. So please type them in the chat or type hand, and I will call on you, and you can unmute and say it aloud. Thank you. Any questions at all, either on any of the concepts, applying any of them, ideas around them? Yeah, Katie, so you said, can you give a preview on how to find the kernel? I think you need to relentlessly prioritize, right? In different audiences, there may be different kernels for different audiences, but if you could only tell a certain audience one thing, what would you tell them? What is that one thing that you would want them to walk away with? And that's how I would think about the kernel. Anastasia, in terms of practical value, all about useful information, right? So people don't only share things that make them look good, they share news that they can use, sort of useful information. And so it's sharing useful things to help others. Anything else? Thank you for the nice thank yous in the chat. What are existing triggers we might use right away for our work? Yeah, I mean, I think that really depends on what you're trying to do, right? So it's thinking about what audiences do you want to move, what's around them in their surrounding environment, and how you can use that to become a reminder. So it depends on who your audience is and what that thing is you want them to think about. But there's lots more both in the book in the triggers chapter and the resources around that. It really depends specifically on sort of who you're targeting. Start with that who, then think about the when, right? When do you want them to think about you guys? Then what, and then the how. Okay. Do I have any examples from triggers from the social good world that you can share? I mean, lots of them, right? So think about Movember and how Movember did a great job of linking donating money to men's cancers to mustaches, right? And then when you see mustaches in the month of November, you think about donating to social causes. So, you know, really think about what in the environment is a good reminder and how we can use that to drive action. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, it seems like there are no more questions in the chat. Thank you guys very much. My email address is here. If there's anything I do to help, please let me know. And otherwise, have a great rest of your day. I really appreciate you guys coming. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonah, for that insightful presentation. We really appreciated all the knowledge and insight that you had to share with us.